I want to introduce you to this breakout session called Self-Care for Caregivers, such an important topic. And we have with us two amazing speakers, and I wanted to briefly introduce them before letting them take over. Marguerite O'Brien is the Director of Wellness, Prevention, and Advocacy Services at UofSC. She earned her bachelor's and master's degree from USC and is proud to be working at her alma mater. In addition to serving on university committees, Marguerite also provides supervision to MSW students, is a university one-on-one instructor, and leads mindful sessions on campus. She's trained in mindfulness based stress reduction and is trained in True Colors facilitator. Marguerite also serves on national committees to the American College Health Association and often presents at regional and national conferences. She also is a certified personal trainer, fitness and yoga instructor. She's active in the community and volunteers regularly with the American Red Cross and the Women's Shelter. And Dr. Rebecca Caldwell serves as an Assistant Vice President of Administration and Wellbeing at the University Health Services. She joined the University of South Carolina in January of 2016 and has over 15 years of experience in substance abuse and violence prevention and intervention in higher learning. In her role, she will provide administrative direction for financial operation, human resources, mental health services, and a multidisciplinary team of health educators, advocates, and public health specialists. Dr. Caldwell has authored over $2 million in state and federal grants for innovative alcohol and drug and violence prevention and mental health promotion programs for high school and college students. She earned her doctorate in education leadership from Clemson University, a certified in core public health concepts from the University of North Carolina, a master's degree in counseling and human resource development from South Dakota State University, and a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of North Carolina. It's a pleasure to have you guys with us today. And I'm going to close my video and mic to let you share your screen and start your presentation.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's really a pleasure to be here. Let me go ahead and share our screen or my screen. 1 second. Okay, we should be good to go, I believe. So welcome. We're really thrilled to be with you all today, and glad you're here. So like as Lisa mentioned, we really want to utilize the chat feature because quite frankly, as a facilitator, and you all have probably done this before too, it's kind of odd to be in a space where the only person I can see is Rebecca. And so we know you're out there, we see your name. So this will be a much more richer experience for us if we are able to use our chat feature. So we'll start with some things right there in our chat. So in today's session, what we really would like to have an opportunity to do is to talk with you all about how to care for ourselves. You all are in the business of caring for others and making sure others are okay in your work life, and I would imagine in your home life as well. So it can get a bit much, right? It can be stressful. We're in the holiday season, and so it can lead to some feelings of overwhelm. So today we're hoping to discuss some strategies that will help us live with intention, with purpose, and with mindfulness as we go through the next several weeks as we get into the new year. And so what we'd like to do at first is really, as we gather together, to get a sense of who you all are. So what I'd love for you to do is to type into the chat. First, start by just closing your eyes and just give yourself a moment to take a couple of deep breaths, to become present in this moment, in this space, in this session with us. And if available, press your feet into whatever surface is beneath you. And notice any of the sounds that are going on in your environment. And then I'd like for you to type three words into the chat. And the first is the town or city where you are, the space that you're currently in, and the material that's underneath your feet. So town or city where you are, the space you're in, and what material is under. And I'll read some as they come through. So we got Edgefield, home office, and carpet. Florence, office, carpet. Lots of offices and carpet. Columbia, Batesburg, den and carpet. Wonderful. People, a couple of seconds. Someone's in Columbia in a colleague's borrowed office in their feet in their sassy Friday shoes, which I love that. I want to see those shoes actually. Air under feet because in a recliner tile, get some tiles from hardwood. Yeah, Saluda, Anderson, Greenville. It's so wonderful to have you all here, Bamberg. Okay, so the next thing, if you would, is to think about and type into the chat, what is something you need to put into your mental parking lot, kind of set aside to be able to fully be present for this session today? And you can type that into the chat as well. Your to-do list, amen. Work list, yeah. The home to-do list, the phone, service note, office work, service notes, all the to-dos, yes. So we encourage you just for the next little bit that we're together to mentally and even physically, if you have some, if there's that list, you know, on your desk, your sticky notes, if you're like me, a list maker, there's something. I've got like 4 journals that I work out of, like literally like kind of push it aside so that you're not looking at it. If your phone is with you, it possibly is, maybe put it on silent or vibrate or turn it over so you don't see the screen light up when something comes, right? So we would ask you to do that so we can be present with us, right? These are the things that we're going to go through in the next few minutes with you while we talk about challenges of being a helping professional. I'm going to skip to the next slide so to move us through. So our objectives for today as we go through working on being mindful and present is to realize that our vocations and our avocations and our lives are all intertwined, right? To explore the challenges that come with giving to others while trying to maintain some sense of inner peace. To explore how stress affects our bodies, our minds, and our spirits, and then to discuss some strategies and practice a couple of strategies to help us fill our cups when we feel like we're running low or running on empty. So, how do we stay on course? We know it is challenging to be of service to others, and sometimes it's a very thankless thing. It can feel very thankless. And so, we want to talk through today with you how we maintain our passion, our compassion, and attend to ourselves while we attend to others. And this includes attending to our families and friends, as well as the people that we serve through our work, through the things that we're passionate about. And to notice that trying to juggle these things, making sure that we're attending to all of these things can be stressful, can cause suffering internally, and sometimes that manifests in the way that we externalize, the way we operate in the world. So,
all right. So we want to start with a little bit of a well-being checkup, and I don't know about you, when someone asks me how I am, or someone is genuine when they respond to the question, how are you? I think the answer today is it's complicated, right? Our lives have never been more complex as we kind of navigate a second round of the holiday season, a second winter of living with COVID, of just mass national and international change. And so when you think about how are you, I want to invite you to take a look at this well-being, this kind of dimensions of wellness model. And take a second and kind of look around that model and think about which ones you feel okay with and which ones give you a little kind of twinge of wishing or wanting things to be different. And as you look around, I'd invite you to also take a second to think about genuinely how you think you're doing in each of these areas for you. Because when it comes to wellness, there's our individual well-being, and then there can be a lot of performative stuff out there. A lot of people want to tell us, how to handle our physical wellness, how exactly our spiritual wellness should look, and so sometimes we have to dive past what other people tell us well-being looks like in each of these arenas to look like, to look at how you're doing. So I want to invite you to look at it. And why don't you drop in the chat, maybe a place you feel really like you're very happy with your well-being, or maybe even your well-being is actively growing, and you're excited and energized, and maybe a place that there's some challenge that you would like to work on that well-being. So I'll give you a second to chat on that. So you're gonna say, here's where I'm growing, here's where I want to grow. Let's say it that way. You may find there's places in here that the pandemic experience gave you gifts. Like for me personally, curiously, like the social wellness dimension grew for me. Like I really deepened some friendships during that time. Where occupational were just lots of changes, and that was a really mixed bag. Thanks, Candy. Yeah, think about environmental well-being. I think that's really interesting. Think about where changes are. And you may feel like, I feel really well-rounded. I think we feel like people are often in really terrific places when they have a lot, they feel like they're pretty well balanced. If you think about this as a wheel, you want it to roll like a wheel instead of a flat tire, somewhere along the way. And so you may feel really good, and that's great too. I think for some folks, the last 2 years have really given them an opportunity to get pretty hyper-focused on what matters. And that's, don't be afraid to say that. I think sometimes we, as we kind of negotiate our current lives, there's those of us who have moments and places where we're hurting, and then we have moments and places where there's a lot of clarity and wellness. And sometimes I think we don't let people have the space for the clarity and wellness, or to be able to say, actually, I'm doing great. Things are okay. Yeah, that's stagnant stuff. Absolutely. And there's lots of, as the old phrase goes, lots of cheese being moved. Our ideas about what productivity is, our ideas about what we want in work, our ideas about what we want our well-being to look like, they're changing. And so that sometimes when we think about where I am here and now, it can be a little different. Absolutely. All right, let's go ahead forward, and we'll kind of keep this stuff in mind. I want to talk a little bit today, especially in the next short while, about managing stress and how we do that in a variety of kind of arenas. And so stress, I imagine we all feel it. Most humans feel it. There's different ways to describe it. A definition we really like is stress is a relationship between the person and their environment that's perceived by the person as exceeding their coping resources and threatening their well-being. I think that's an interesting definition to reflect on, because it really gets at, for some of us, it may not be, for some of us thrive in busyness, or some of us thrive in growth. Some of us want lifestyles that have more predictability. Some of us really we've got so many personal, viewpoints and preferences and how we want to live our lifestyle. But if we really think about like the point where something feels stressful for us, so we think our well-being's at risk, or we're not sure we can cope. We'll talk today about expanding coping skills. Go ahead, Marguerite. And so when you think about stress, when you're feeling stress, let's drop a few things in the chat about what you feel in your body. In your body, what does stress feel like? Yeah, tension, tightness, shortness of breath, physical tension. Get a lot of it right here in this jaw, right here in these shoulders. You may know your other places. I know other folks, it's, the head, the stomach can be a big one. Yeah, someone sitting on your chest. It's when we feel threatened, and threat is such a, evolutionary experience, right? Our body is ready to roll, is ready to react. And so we have these really very physical and kind of deeply embedded reactions to that. And there are a lot of the ones you describe. Absolutely. So on this slide, there's really kind of the body's stress response. And so it starts with when something comes into your senses and says to you, there's a threat here. Or something, your information's coming in, phase one, all 5 senses, and maybe a few others, some intuition, some scanning, etc. And then your brain decides there's a threat, interprets what's going on. And when it thinks that there's a threat, it kind of activates, it arouses itself. We physically and mentally become ready to react, respond. We're going to figure out if we're going to kind of freeze, if we're going to fight, if we're going to flee. That's really kind of where your body releases a lot of hormones. It changes physically to get ready for that. And then once that threat is passed, it's our body's desire to kind of return to homeostasis. And so we're going to talk today about different styles of stress management. I kind of want to talk about thinking about stress management kind of 2 different ways. There's 2 kind of styles. And so one of them is really kind of, what are the daily things that we can do to maintain our kind of ability to accept life on life's terms? And so that's really kind of interrupting stage 2, so that as life's experiences happen to you, that you are more and more able, you're ready to respond, that you feel that you're self-capable of living with these threats, that you are confident, that you can manage them. Remember, stress is when we think we can't cope, but when we think we're at risk, it's when we have faith that everything will be okay. Those kinds of long-term stress management, or what I kind of call the, kind of the setup, or the kind of baseline of what we do will help us at stage 2. And then once we are aroused, once we know something unexpected happens, right? None of us were bumping into 2020 thinking, I'm going to live with a pandemic. I'm going to stay in my house for months on end, and so forth. And so once an unexpected or unanticipated threat happens, stage 3 is where we're actually in active coping. And we'll talk a little bit about what things help there. And so it's kind of the stress resistance and stress rescue is maybe a good way to think about it. Marguerite and I do tons and tons of work with folks on resiliency. And we ask populations, our students and staff, our faculty, our staff, when we say, tell us a little bit about what is resiliency. There's a 2-word phrase that they say almost inevitably within 3 guesses. Can you imagine what that might be? Do you want to type in, when you think about someone's resiliency, what does resiliency mean? Let's come through on a little lag. I don't want to lose momentum. So what people overwhelmingly say, what I imagine you might say, is the phrase bounce back. Our ability to bounce back from life's difficulties. And exactly, Christina, Candy, you're right on board. And so when you think about kind of this idea, I don't know about you, obviously you work with small children for a living, you support them. I imagine many of you might live with children or have lived with children. And I don't know about you, but I have some kids, and I don't have one anymore, but I've owned a backyard trampoline. I bet a bunch of you guys have. And if you've ever set one up for work or for your yard and so forth, you unpack the package, you've got this frame, you've got this sheet, and then you have 50, 100 or more springs. And you connect the sheet to the frame with these springs. And so when I think about the everyday readiness of resiliency, I always think about those things as springs. And so we'll talk about the things we know that make good springs, things like mindfulness and meditation and contemplative and spiritual practices, gratitude, savoring, strong relationships, time spent in relation with people that you care about who kind of feed your soul. Each of those are springs. And when we do that stuff daily, we arrange our daily life to include these things with intention, or we're lucky enough maybe to just kind of have our daily life set up to include some of that, then that's really setting the resistance in place. It sets us up for the bounce back. But then here come stressors, right? Here come unexpected stressors, just, the car accident, the pandemic, the illness, one-off things, job loss, just overwhelm, having so much to do. All these are in here. We're bouncing. All these things are bouncing against us, right? We're coming down and that thing's coming up, and vice versa. And some things are acute, and other things are not. Other things are like fogs, right? You're bouncing away on your trampoline, and here rolls in a fog, and that fog might be a depressive episode. That fog, the long-term experience of the pandemic, a lengthy illness, addiction in a family member. These fogs that we're also, that just envelop and we're trying to deal with. They come along as well as we kind of bounce away. And so on this slide, there's some real specific coping techniques, and just give different ideas. When we go through this with users, we'll say, a lot of things that are great coping techniques, we're really either dismissive of, or we just assume they're not good ideas, like watching Netflix is a really valuable coping technique in the distraction category. Screaming in a pillow is a great technique in the emotional release category. Addressing, and there's bigger ones too, like addressing negative thought patterns, right? If you're a catastrophizer, and if you didn't know if you were or not, you sure do know now. Once something starts rolling, your mind's way of trying to protect you is to add more and more and more. Try to play out all the scenarios to the best of your ability. It's a way to try to wrest control. Trying to address and challenge that, is a great coping technique. So there's lots of good ones on there. There's ones that work great for you. Maybe folks can just kind of drop in your chat, what's your go-to coping technique with kind of acute stressors, or what have you learned are great coping techniques for you from this list or beyond here in the last 2 years. Breathing. Yeah, self-talk. Yep. Those good old-fashioned hobbies, we've relearned them as a culture. They're really key. Getting outside, singing in the car, I love it. Yeah, taking a break. The shower, I do understand that one. Yeah, spiritual practice, reading the Bible. Absolutely. Awesome. Thanks for sharing, you guys. All right, Marguerite, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Yeah. So thanks, Rebecca. And so Rebecca did a great setup for talking about the concept of resiliency. And we wanted to focus on that today with y'all in terms of resilience being a skill set. It's not something that you it's an end product. It's actually a journey that we can continue to hone and develop our skills of resiliency. And we use it as a tool to cope during hard times. And I would say for sure that if we sat down and took the time to reflect on the things that we've learned over the past almost 2 years now with living during a pandemic, we have exhibited amazing resiliency skills throughout all this time. And it's the ability, right, to weather the storms of life, whatever comes our way, like Rebecca so beautifully talked about the fog coming in. And resiliency includes concepts like self-concept, like how do we identify, what are our values, self-compassion, reframing failure, and using coping skills. And so for the next little bit, I want us to focus on the self-compassion piece. And I want to address the image on the screen right now, the beautiful piece of pottery that is has the seams of gold within it that someone decided to make, flowers with as well on that piece of pottery. This is a Japanese technique you might be familiar with called kintsugi, and it's whenever a piece of pottery is broken, instead of throwing it away, they mix the glue to fix it with some gold dust. Typically it could be silver or another precious metal dust, and so it creates something new and different out of what was thought to be broken and unusable. So it not only gives the object new life, but it's also a reminder that we as humans are imperfect, and we can embrace those imperfections and come out of whatever hardship, whatever stressor that caused some brokenness. We can come out of it on the other side in a way that we're healed, we're different, life might be different, but we are still put back together and whole in maybe some new and different ways. And so again, we can learn these skills. And if you think about over the past year or two, keep referencing the pandemic because my gosh, we're still in it. But if you think about when you've had to deal with something challenging, or you felt stressed, or you felt like you made an error, whether it was something at work, or you said something to a family member, one of your kids, you're like, oh, why did that come out of my mouth? Or why am I doing this? You felt like you weren't acting as your best self. If you think back to a time recently when you've done that, and think about what is your internal conversation when something happens like that. And if you want to, you can type in the chat. I'll be happy to see those notes if you like. This is what I typically say to myself. I would imagine that for many of us, that initial thought that we have, or that initial self-talk, is not the most positive thing all the time. And no judgment if it isn't, no judgment if it is. But it's sometimes we don't speak as kindly to ourselves as we do to other people. And so what that ends up doing for ourselves is putting us into a spiral of suffering. Because if I mess up something, if I make a mistake and I say to myself, oh my gosh, Marguerite, how can you be so stupid? Like, how do you not know this thing? How didn't you just do this thing? Like, didn't you, submit a report about the same thing a few months ago? How come this time you can't seem to do it? Like, what's wrong with you? Why can you be so stupid? And so you can get into a spiral of negativity, which then also it causes internal suffering, right? It causes suffering for us. So what I would like to do is to show us a video. Because what we often will do is talk to our friends better than we talk to ourselves, or more nicely than we talk to ourselves. Just as a upfront to the video, as a precursor, just to talk through the construct, or the things that make up the components of self-compassion. And it is that mindfulness, recognizing when we're stressed, or when we're struggling, without judging, without being overly critical of it, just observing, okay, this has happened. Being supportive of oneself, having that self-kindness, instead of being that judge that's kind of pointing the finger at yourself, right? And then remembering our common humanity. We are all connected. Everybody makes mistakes. You're not the only one experiencing this thing. And so we want to watch this video now that will kind of walk us through. You might be familiar with the work of Dr. Kristen Neff and Chris Germer, but here we go.
Hi, Kaz. Hi, Shelley. As you know, we are producing a course called The Power of Self-Compassion. So we're just talking to people today about how they treat themselves. Do you have a critical voice? And if so, what do you find it saying to you?
I definitely have a critical voice. I think everybody does. And I think they all start from when you're a kid. So, I think all the things that my parents said, I hear, but it's normally about not doing a good job.
It's constantly stopping me as I try to complete thoughts or try to make steps forward.
It's a voice that always tells me that I'm not enough, or that I need to do better, or that there's something about me that I have to change. When you fail or make a mistake, what types of things run through your mind?
I'm not worthy. Everybody's going to see my mistake. Nobody else makes mistakes like I do.
You're stupid. I can't believe you forgot something easy. This was basic. Why are you having so much trouble doing something so simple?
People don't want me around, that I'm uninteresting, boring, and or just too weird for people's company.
It says that I should have done better. And sometimes it says mean words about myself.
It's probably the loudest thing that's usually coming through my head before anything else is at least ringing that failure over and over again.
And let me give you a scenario where a friend of yours comes to you, has made a mistake, and what would you say to that friend?
Well, the first thing I would tell them that it's okay. You don't need to feel all the weight of this.
Most likely you're holding on to this more tightly than anybody else.
This in no way, reflects your character, reflects your ability to do something. Definitely a lot kinder to my friends than I am myself. How do you think you would change if you used that same voice that you use towards your friends on yourself during those moments of failure and mistakes?
I think it would be, incredible because you're not going to talk to your friends the way that you talk to yourself sometimes. And I think that if you're constantly kind of reassuring yourself and letting yourself know that you are enough, then your thought process will change.
When you treat yourself like you do somebody else, you start feeling better, I think, right away, and you keep it in context much more instead of letting things be blown out of proportion.
I think I would have a lot less anxiety in my day-to-day. I think there would be kind of a weight lifted.
It would definitely make me feel better and happier, because when I usually say, like, when that voice that says mean stuff in my head, I'm not really happy and sad.
How could the world look differently if we were more compassionate towards ourselves?
I think the world would work better. I think through compassion and self-compassion, we all would just recognize that we're all human.
As a society, we could learn to love one another and show that love on a regular basis. I think that this world would be perfect.
There's a saying that if you love yourself, then you can love others. Well, sometimes I believe it goes in the reverse, and that if you can show that compassion that you show to others and bring it into yourself, I think that's where true growth can happen.
I think it would be magical. That's really the only word for it. Magical to be able to reflect on ourselves from a place of love rather than criticism.
Yeah, so any thoughts about that? Thank you, Sarah Grace, for that comment that you wrote in there. Constantly reminding yourself that the kindness and grace I believe others deserve is the same kindness and grace I deserve to give myself. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so we are often not kind to ourselves. And I'm not sure why. We don't really have a whole lot of time to unpack that in this session, but it's something to reflect upon, is why that we do that. And I think one of the things that I've learned, Lise mentioned that we're trained in Mindfulness Based Stress Reduction, MBSR, so is Rebecca. And I will say one of my meditation teachers talks about like what we give attention to, where our attention goes, our energy flows. So if we are consistently noticing what's wrong, whether it's within ourselves or within others, and as humans, we're hardwired, right, to notice danger, to notice things that might, cause us harm or someone else harm, and to step in, right? But that's good, but it's not, we don't have to constantly be in that mode. So when we are consistently looking for either what's wrong or the negative, especially in ourselves, then we end up, we use the brain as a metaphor, then we end up watering the weeds in the garden of our brain. So we're tending to these things that are dead and taking over and choking things out, right? So they're like, we can't see the beauty in ourselves when we're thinking about, I'm stupid, I made this mistake, I can't do this, I'm not enough, whatever, I'm not a good enough parent, I'm not a good enough employee, da 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 da. However, when we start to think about the positive, so show that grace and compassion and kindness towards ourselves, just like we do to others, then we start to water the flowers in our brains, if you will. And so we start to build those skills, we start to build those tendencies then to notice that more. And so in terms of like mindfulness, I encourage us, notice beauty. And you might already do a great job of that, but notice the beauty during your day. I dare say, I know I do it. I'll walk across this campus where I work, or I'll take the same route to work, and I don't notice stuff because it's all the same, right? But notice, leaves have been changing. Don't miss it, because in a few weeks, the trees will be bare. And I don't want you to walk around and think, when did that happen? Notice beauty. Notice the smile on your child's face. Notice the butterfly that flies by your house, whatever it is. Just notice beauty to build those skills. And like that last person said, turn it in on yourself. Notice that beauty within. This is a cliche image, right? We know it. We've heard it. If you've ever flown on a plane, you've heard it. You got to put the oxygen mask on yourself first. We cannot be of use to others if we are running low. We can't fill from an empty cup. And we are, again, in holiday season. For some of us, we're in the midst of our holiday. If we celebrate Hanukkah, Kwanzaa's coming up, Christmas is coming up, New Year's, all the things, solstice, all the things. How are we going to tend to self and family and others, and in a way that keeps us mindful and present and feeling maybe a little bit less stressed this holiday season? Rebecca's going to talk about a concept that we've been talking about around here.
Thanks, Marguerite. So one of the things is we were kind of talking about how, in addition to the fact that you guys are these heroes of folks who work with very young children, is the fact that we are kind of living in the holiday season for most of us. And so we want to introduce this concept about just really a kind of a get out of jail free card. You know, a lot of us have so many traditions, ideas, things we've done before that we want to do again, things we've missed and we're eager to do. And so what that means for us is that the holidays become, in addition to, in many of our spiritual traditions, is to be a time of contemplation, of gratitude, of anticipation, of family. Instead, for many of us, especially those of us with families, becomes just a tremendously overwhelming to-do list. When we set some things aside to join us, I imagine a lot of that mental to-do list included like your holiday preparation. And we really invite you to think about, do you have 2 or 3 non-negotiables for yourself this holiday season that are the most meaningful and the ones you don't want to miss? Maybe you even write a list of everything you do over the holidays. Pick 2 or 3 that matters. And if you live in family with other people, can you have that conversation with them as well? Can you say to your partner or your children or your parents, if you could only do 2 or 3 things this season, what would it be? And really focus on that. And at the same time, say to them, if you had a get out of jail free card, if you wanted to not do something this season, what would that be? And could you honor that with each other? I was on a panel a week or 2 ago with other folks talking about living in families with addiction and the holidays, and each of us kind of named that as one of our primary kind of coping mechanisms to get through the holidays in families that have addiction in them, and to say, it doesn't matter what else happens. Like my friend and colleague said, I will go to Christmas Eve service because that is so meaningful for me. Is my partner coming? I don't know. People are welcome to come with me. But that's one of my holiday non-negotiables. And so what are yours? And think about that. See, can you have some conversation with others? And then also, can you pass to the right? If you are like, what I want to let go of is that dang old, family recipe, and your child is like, this is one of my 3, is there an opportunity to say, here's the card, right? Like, here's grandma's recipe card. I can sit with you while you do it, or give us a try. Or I have heard that this restaurant down the street has a fantastic version of that thing. Why don't we order it for pickup? And so think about what's kind of negotiable for you. Go ahead. Okay. So we both kind of referenced the concepts of mindfulness and meditation as things that can be can be some major springs to dealing with stress, especially kind of mindfulness-based stress reduction. And when we think about mindfulness, it's often confused or used interchangeably in our culture with meditation or kind of other contemplative practices, and they aren't exactly the same. Mindfulness is being the action of being fully present, not be in a non-judgmental way. So you're not judging yourself, you're not in the past, you're not in the future, you're here right now. And you might get there through meditation or prayer or other intentional practices. But, I read a great article once about how for a number of folks, like house cleaning is a mindfulness thing. If you are like washing away on those dishes, or you're vacuuming away upstairs, and that's a time that your mind just kind of goes into idle and it goes into park, that's probably mindfulness practice for you. And so finding places and spaces where you can get fully present, whether it's Marguerite's kind of beautiful examples about just noticing beauty, or other places that just can allow you to, in essence, listen to intuition. It's not always a blank mind. It's really just kind of a mind that's fully here now. And I've practiced meditation for many years now, and the more stressed I am, the more the first 3 to 4 minutes of my meditation, which is really that practice of intentional kind of focus building, is my brain going, great, you're not doing something else right now. Let me remind you of my top 5 concerns. That is, it's less the case, but my brain is not going to stop doing that. I just know that my meditation practice includes getting still, getting focused. Those 3 to 5 things my brain wants to do are going to come on in, and I'm just going to let them float right out like clouds and say, I'll think about that later. I promise this will allow me to get to that. So it is well worth, there's so many great ways to practice meditation. And we'll talk in actually a few minutes. In a few minutes, we'll practice a few little, what I call kind of rescue mindfulness activities. Great. Actually, let's bounce ahead and we'll bounce back to that one. So let's practice a few. Marguerite and I get to teach a lot of mindfulness on the campus. And so whenever I do kind of a 1-hour session, we open and end with some longer meditations. There's so many beautiful opportunities to learn that out there for free. But I always in the middle teach what I call rescue techniques, right? We have blown past the not getting riled up about something, and we are straight up like in a hard moment, right? Those stress management those stress symptoms that we listed earlier, they are present and accounted for. How can some intentional mindfulness in the moment help? And so maybe we can just go ahead and practice. I'm going to have us practice maybe 2 that I particularly like. And so one of them is the idea of what's called boxed breathing. And so it is really kind of getting present, actually counting breath. Well, the more distracted we are, the more stressed we are, the less easily we will get into that kind of open-minded place. But if we can get to breath and count it out, it's a really easy way to bring some mindfulness and meditation right to the moment. So I'm going to count us through what's called a boxed breath. Boxed breathing is actually taught like by Navy SEALs. It's a really effective technique, and let you go ahead and practice along with me. So I invite you to kind of sit up straight and to just follow along with me. We're going to do 4 beats in. We're going to hold for 4 beats. We're going to go 4 beats out, and we're going to hold for 4 beats. So let's do 3 rounds of that. Okay, so close your eyes if you want. You don't have to, but let's go from here. I'm going to invite you to come in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. So that's a quickie that works for lots of folks. It's known to get your mind focused, bring your heart rate down. So that's a great rescue one. I use that one. Let's do the second one that actually involves some physicality. So when we're in high distress, we often are kind of exit our body on a certain level. And so rescue techniques that bring you back to your body can be really powerful. And so this one is a simple finger trace. So I'm gonna hold my hand up here. I see it. In this activity, you focus in on your breath as well, but you use the in-breath to trace the left side of a finger, and then you use the out-breath to trace the right side. And then the in-breath of the left side and the out-breath of the right side. You're coming up, this middle finger, down. You're coming up, down, out, down. When you're done, you can just go right back the other way. You're going up and down and up. So this one has the benefit of grounding. Grounding is when you kind of get back sensory-wise. And so, another rescue technique, which can really help folks who are panicking, is to look for something for each of the 5 senses. You can say, name 5 things you see, and 4 things you hear, and 3 things, you can feel. Grounding techniques, when we use physical touch, can really, really be a helpful way to move forward. So, all right. Okay, great. And we're going to back up. All of this goes together, whether it's our long-term preparation, readiness, spring loading, whether it is our kind of rescue techniques in the moment of heightened stress, whether it's our coping skills we practice regularly or we up when we are in heightened periods of stress. Our goal of all of it is to respond, not react. And so this stop technique can be really helpful when you find yourself reacting. And I don't know about you, the more stressed I am, the more I'm right there reaction-wise, right? And so if you find yourself having a big response to something and you want it to be different, and not every response has to be stopped in its tracks, but it is, if you are trying to temper or measure or want to try to think differently or be intentional, when something happens, this technique of stopping, taking a breath, right? So big breath, maybe a few, observing what's going on and saying, what's happening here? If you have thoughts racing, for you, that technique of challenging thoughts or asking yourself, is this real? Asking yourself, is what I want to say in response to this? Useful, appropriate, you know, kind of what I want to say and who I want to be. And then when you feel like you're ready to proceed, you know, we are often, when things are happening quickly, we often react. I think also culturally, sometimes we set up an expectation. Everything has to be immediately reacted to. And by using this stop technique, to stop, take a breath, observe, and then proceed, we can often move forward with a little bit more intention. And these techniques, practicing, will often kind of get us a little more in that respond mode. They're one of its benefits.
So I like to share quotes, and so this one is from Eckhart Tolle. You might be familiar with with his work. Sometimes letting things go is an act of far greater power than defending or hanging on. And so, as Rebecca was mentioning, those techniques that we went through just a few minutes ago, the breathing and grounding techniques, and the stop technique, can help us to let go, to bring mindfulness into the situation, to let go of attachments that might cause us suffering unnecessarily. And for right now, we talked about the holidays. We really encourage you to make that list of things, either all the things that you do, and what are your non-negotiables. Ask your family to talk about those things as well. And here, I think this quote really is powerful for that. You know, is it okay to let go of something that you've done just because you've done it every year? Yeah. And maybe the person, maybe if it's you, if you're clinging on to something, like, we're all going to do this every year, my goodness, whether you like it or not, we're doing the Christmas caroling or whatever it is, I don't know. Maybe is it causing so much unnecessary suffering among your family? Then if so, let's move on to something else, right? Another thing we'd like for you all to do is to think about gratitude, not just at Thanksgiving, not just every once in a while, but research is showing us, the research that Dr. Seligman does and Dr. Amit Sood do around happiness and positivity. When people express gratitude regularly, they will report a greater sense of well-being and happiness. And so, encourage you all, and if you're willing to type into the chat something that you're grateful for today in this moment. And some of you might have a regular gratitude practice. A lot of people keep a journal, which is wonderful. Some folk that are not quite, the writing type, you might speak it into your phone, or you might just speak it into the air. Maybe your morning starts with expressing gratitude for anything and everything. Sometimes, honestly, I will express gratitude for hot water on demand when I take a shower, because that doesn't exist all over the world, right? So how lucky am I, right? For the sun shining, for this weather today, when I have friends where it's snowing already, those sorts of things, family, friends, of course, but thinking about anything, like the thing you notice the beauty of something, right? Yes, thank you. Family, health, work, life, God, family, friends, a second grandchild on the way right now. That's awesome. Yeah, so all the little things. And it might seem a little bit trite, but that's this sort of thing, practicing gratitude on a regular basis, waters the flowers in the garden of your mind. And it helps you shift more towards that than the negative. There's so much negative in the world. We are bombarded with all of this negativity on a regular basis. So if we can do the things, expressing compassion to ourselves and to others, noticing the beauty, taking that intentional pause, practicing those grounding techniques, it will help us to lead, I think, more happy lives, and just be more present fully with the people with us. And so, speaking of that, we do have a resource that we wanted to share with you.
We had a chance to visit with these folks. This is the Department of Mental Health's SC Hopes line. They have a special focus. It's a way to access mental health care in the moment, but also to get access to mental health care here in South Carolina. And this project is very specifically focused on educators and healthcare workers. And so most services are free or extraordinarily low cost. So it's not ours, but we had a chance to, when I thought about working with you and your team, or for yourself, for your colleagues, for your families, is actually available to all South Carolinians, and they're doing some special kind of group and focused work with educators, which certainly you all are some of our most important educators in the state.
Thanks, Rebecca, so much. Well, we want to thank you all for being with us today and engaging with us in the chat. We have a couple of minutes left. If there are any questions, we're more than happy to answer them if we're able to, or get resources to you if needed. So yeah, thanks for being here, y'all. Thanks for First Steps for asking us to do this.
I want to give it a moment, so if anybody had any final thoughts or any final comments, to put it in the chat. But I also want to take the opportunity to thank you again, Marguerite and Rebecca, for this extraordinary session. I feel it was a treat to me to moderate. I feel very grounded, and I think the reflections you brought were very relevant for our audience and the summit. I also wanted to remind everyone that our final plenary with Reverend Tiffany Nolling Boykin is going to take place now shortly at 11:30, and we hope you guys can join us. It's going to be a presentation about wading the water, and we hope that will inspire us to understand that a village is required to battle the injustice that plague the lives of children and their families. It will also emphasize the importance of one individual being brave enough and bold enough to act on behalf of a child who is not their own. So we hope that it's going to be an inspirational plenary to close out our summary this year. I really wanted to thank you again for the presentation and for the audience to participate and put their thoughts in the chat so actively during the time that we spent together.
Thank you all so much. I see a quick question, and I know we have maybe like 30 seconds left, but for Danielle that put the question in. For tips for supervisors, yes, do things like start meetings with a moment of silence, or take 3 deep breaths, whatever it is. Incorporate things like that, strategies into your meetings. Start meetings where people can put their to-do list, their mental to-do list, their physical aside. So you give permission to be present fully in that space. And practice that yourself then. If you're the supervisor, practice